let's jump right into this explainer. We're looking at a case file that starts out, well, incredibly mundane. It's just a dry procedural missing persons report from a remote tea-growing district. But as we track the evidence step by step today, you're going to see how this procedural report unravels into a chilling reality. It's a story that brilliantly and honestly terrifyingly bridges modern corporate greed with ancient, deeply rooted folklore. We're going to follow the evidence exactly as the investigator did to understand what actually happened out there on those dark hillsides. You might want to keep the lights on for this one.
Okay, 17. That's the number to keep in mind. The district labor office logged 17 missing person reports over an 8-month period, all from one single tea estate. Now, these weren't tourists who just wandered off the path, and they weren't kids. We're talking about 17 highly experienced adult workers, pluckers and pruners who knew every inch of those hillsides like the back of their hands. And they just vanished, completely without a trace, while walking distances they had walked literally 1,000 times before. The official file? Well, it just casually labeled this as worker attrition. But there was one single clue left behind, and it's incredibly eerie. According to the last people to see them alive, every single missing worker did the exact same thing right before they disappeared. They stopped walking, turned their head, and spoke one exact word, coming, to absolutely nobody. And then they just vanished into the dark. It is a chillingly specific final action repeated 17 times over.
So enter Naveen. He's an insurance auditor, a strictly analytical numbers guy through and through. He absolutely wasn't sent out to the estate to investigate missing persons, and he's definitely no ghost hunter. He was actually assigned to look into a totally unrelated insurance claim about a fire in a drawing shed. Checking for fraud. He is completely unsuperstitious, but, well, numbers guys notice patterns, and Naveen accidentally stumbles right into the middle of a terrifying one. Because when Naveen starts running the data, it reveals an unmistakable and really chilling set of circumstances surrounding every single disappearance. Every incident happened on a moonless night, every victim was walking completely alone, and in every single case, they said the word coming to an empty space. Naveen quickly realized this wasn't just random attrition, this was a highly specific methodology. Now, when Naveen tried asking the surviving workers about this pattern, he hit a total brick wall of silence. Nobody wanted to talk. Finally, an elderly tea picker named Bijoya, who had worked there for 40 years and actually lost her own brother to this, finally breaks the silence. She introduces Naveen to the local folklore of the Nishi. She explains that this isn't some ghost of the dead. It's an ancient, faceless presence that's older than the estate itself. It hunts in the spaces between the tea rows at night, and it mimics the voices of trusted loved ones to lure isolated victims away into the dark. The absolutely crucial thing here is understanding Bijoya's strict, unbreakable rules for survival. Every kid in the district is taught these. Rule 1, it only ever mimics trusted voices. Think a spouse, a parent, a best friend. Rule 2, and this is where it gets really terrifying, it never calls a name it hasn't already heard a living person say first. Which means if it's calling your name, it's been close to you. It's been listening. And Rule 3, the golden rule. You must never answer. The Nishi can't cross a threshold it hasn't been invited through, and speaking back to it is an invitation. Naturally, Naveen just writes all this down as color for his insurance report. Like I said, he's a skeptic. But that very night, while he's walking the last stretch of a pitch-black dirt road back to his guest house all alone, that skepticism gets completely shattered. Right behind him, he hears a soft, warm voice calling his name just once. It had the exact cadence, the exact worried lilt of his wife's voice. The only problem? Every rational part of Naveen's brain knows for a fact his wife is 400 kilometers away in the city. Remembering Bijoya's rules, Naveen stops himself from turning around. He grips his bag, refuses to answer, and just speed walks to the lit porch of his guest house, literally counting his steps out loud just to drown out the silence. He manages to lock himself inside, desperately trying to rationalize it as just the wind. But then, the true horror sets in. Right outside his window, his name is called a second time. But this time, it isn't his wife's voice. Terrifyingly, it's his own voice, calling to him from the dark. So the next morning, a very shaken Naveen checks his audit spreadsheets again, and his analytical mind suddenly connects this horror back to the numbers, uncovering a sinister corporate motive deliberately disguised by this 200-year-old folklore. You see, generational tenant-worker rights meant that displacing these workers legally would take years of court battles. But the empty estate strategy?
Well, if the workers are so terrified that they voluntarily flee back to their home villages, the estate essentially empties itself out. No lawsuits, no compensation payouts, no paper trail. The business strategy at play here was as horrific as it was clear. Naveen looks into the estate's new ownership, a holding company that took over just 3 months prior, and he finds a direct inverse correlation. As the worker population drops due to sheer terror, the insurance payouts on accidental equipment losses go up. The new owners had just filed paperwork to convert the exact lower slopes where the disappearances were happening into a new resort development plot. They were literally profiting from the terror, systematically clearing the exact land they needed.
Naveen digs even deeper into the paperwork and manages to trace the holding company back to a shell corporation. And the name behind that shell corporation, it leads him straight to a self-styled tantric consultant. This guy was hired specifically by the new owners and was operating out of an abandoned processing house right at the edge of the estate, a place nobody had dared to set foot in for a decade. This wasn't some random supernatural occurrence. This was a highly coordinated, heavily funded corporate operation.
But here's the thing. This tantric wasn't summoning the monster. You can't summon something that's literally always been there. He was doing something so much worse. Using stolen locks of hair and worn pieces of clothing taken from the workers' quarters, he would stand in that processing house at midnight and whisper their names. He wasn't summoning the nishi. He was feeding it a literal targeting list, guaranteeing exactly who it should hunt next and whose voice it should steal. And the estate owners? They were paying him for every single name successfully cleared from the roster. Realizing he's been asking way too many questions, Naveen knows his own name is definitely on that hit list by now. He barricades himself in his room. But the horror just escalates. The nishi doesn't just wait for him outside. Instead, the guest house landline rings, a phone that hasn't even had a working connection in 6 years. When Naveen tentatively picks it up, he hears his own voice, patiently repeating private, intimate things he had said to his wife days earlier. The entity was proving it had been listening all along, because a phone line isn't a threshold. It's already inside. Knowing that running is only going to get him killed, Naveen decides to go on the offensive. At dawn, he and the surviving workers march straight down to that abandoned processing house. Inside, they discover a room just lined with hair clippings, all labeled with the initials of the vanished workers. And right there in the center, a fresh folder with Naveen's initials. In a moment of furious action, the workers don't even wait for the police. They just burn the entire building to the ground, completely destroying the targeting list. In the aftermath, Naveen returns to civilization and files massive, undeniable fraud and labor rights charges against the estate owners. And you know what? The fire works. The disappearances completely stop, the estate's ownership transfer collapses under the weight of the investigation, and the locals can finally walk the slopes at night again safely. Naveen returns to his safe city life, hundreds of kilometers away, dealing with mundane spreadsheets again. And for a few months, he genuinely believes the whole ordeal is completely over. That is, until an ordinary evening is suddenly interrupted by his phone ringing. It's an unknown number. Assuming it's just a regular call. I mean, he's so far away from the dark dirt roads of the T estate now, he picks it up. But there's just silence on the other end. Just breathing. And then, spoken quietly and patiently in his very own voice, he hears these 3 words. You never answered. The fire had destroyed the targeting list and the corporate scheme, sure, but it hadn't destroyed the one name the nishi had collected fairly, on its own terms, out on that dark road. It just took its time. So the thought I really want to leave you with at the end of this explainer is this. If your phone rang right now and a voice you trusted completely, a spouse, a parent, a best friend, just gently said your name, checking in, how sure are you really that you'd know the difference? Knowing what we've unpacked today about how ancient folklore and predatory modern logic can intertwine so perfectly, would you truly know what is waiting on the other end of the line? Thanks for joining me today. And remember, maybe just let unknown numbers go to voicemail after dark.